Defense attorney DeWitt Lacy. DeWitt, thanks for being with me this afternoon. Truly appreciate it.
Always a pleasure to be here, Michael.
All right. Now, we got to parse through this thing, and we got some time, so there's a lot to parse through. But first and foremost, I want to get from you. I mean, there were some aspects of Dr. Baker's testimony that I think helped the prosecution, but certainly you can't consider him a win. I'd love to get your opinion on the overall sort of effect of his testimony.
I think overall, look, we have to take these things in context of what's been happening in the trial. I mean, as you noted a little bit earlier, Michael, there are other forensic pathologists and pulmonologists, actually, who's testified and given testimony around this area in medicine that Mr. Baker or Dr. Baker was testifying to. I think overall, his testimony really supports the conclusions that other folks have made. As in that the behavior of the officers, specifically in this matter, Chauvin, was the main contributing factor to George Floyd's death. I think that's overall what the jurors will take from it.
But what's lacking, and we can talk about whether this is going to affect what Dr. Chauvin said yesterday. What's lacking from his particular testimony is this idea that oxygen or blockage of oxygen or this knee on the neck was the actual cause. It sounded to me like he's saying because they were wrestling with him and dealing with him, that was too much for his heart to take. But that doesn't necessarily get you to the knee on the neck being the substantial cause of death, or does it?
I think it does. I think it does. Now, look, in the context of civil liability, that's a different question, because you have to ask whether or not the officers had the right to wrestle with George Floyd in the manner that they did. I think there's been substantial testimony given in the trial from police practices experts, from members of the Minnesota Police Department themselves, even the chief, that said, look, behavior of Chauvin directly was not in line with the training. And, they pointed fault at Chauvin from departing from the best police practices. So I think it kind of falls in line with that. Now, look, I think you're right, Michael. The medical examiner does not come out and say very specifically that, the knee on the neck was the actual cause. But I expect that from the medical examiner. And I think that's kind of a fine difference that may be something that the jury kind of disregards at this point. I don't want to say disregards, but it kind of goes over their heads. And, I think the main point is that, he says that the struggle with law enforcement was what led to Mr. Floyd's death. And, I think the jury may have already decided, maybe, I don't know, but with the evidence that's been presented, can already see that, the behavior that Chauvin exhibited was not consistent with the best practices in law enforcement.
But let me ask you this. Here's something that I did think he took off the table with testimony that we just heard, was this idea that there was an overdose. Because I think he said pretty clearly that fentanyl and meth were not factors in his overall conclusion. And I think that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, takes that overdose argument off the table.
I think you're right. I think that is a huge blow to the defense because that is the drumbeat that they clearly have been making from the start of this trial and even beforehand, that fentanyl and drug use. And part of that is, in my mind, it's been my experience in these type of actions. We prosecute these type of actions all the time, Michael, in the civil context. And what the defense does in those circumstances are they beat the drum of, look, this person who's suing us is a drug abuser, and it's kind of things to kind of demonize the character of the person who died or the victim. And I think that's kind of what the defense was doing here, right? They were beating the drum of, well, he was on drugs, and many people don't like the fact that some folks might be using drugs. But I think the fact that Baker says, look, that's not really a significant factor in his understanding of the cause of death, I think that's a big blow to the defense.
Yeah, we'll have to see, of course, what their experts say, but I agree with you. All right, DeWitt, stand by. We are going to take a break right now.